Tell me what you see when you look at me. Do you see another brother lost in these streets looking for his soul?
Trying to find my soul.
Or do you see another brother searching for lost souls in these streets? A street soldier.
Street soldier.
Here to help you get that chip off your shoulder, warm your colder days and sober your drunken ways, and find a way to help you get over these hurdles placed in our path. And this is not meant to amuse you. This is for all those who have questions but are afraid to ask.
I won't be afraid. I won't be afraid. No. When times get hard, you lose your way. Open your mind and hear what I say.
This is a message for the hard and the soft. To those who tune in weekly and to those who keep an eye out for 8 p.m. on Sundays and turn their radios off. The truth hurts. The cloth has been pulled. We're walking around half dead. Use this show as your IV. Alive and Free is a new movement. We've achieved self-destruction. A street soldier promotes self-improvement.
Streets couldn't be no colder, so I gotta be a soldier. It shouldn't be this hard for me. Even when it seems so hopeless, I gotta keep my focus. I'm glad to be alive and free, yeah. Streets couldn't be no colder, so I gotta be a soldier. It shouldn't be this hard for me. Even when it seems so hopeless, I gotta keep my focus. I'm glad to be alive and free,
Yeah. From the Alive and Free National Consortium, International Consortium. Glad to see you here for this conversation on gun violence in America. And I gotta say, the flyer you put together was just great. I mean, that gun laid on top of the flag, that was pretty cool. That was pretty good. You put it up, it was like
have to log in from my phone.
violence in America. The Vita's having problems. I don't know what
I'll
it
probably
is.
try to do that. Let me see if
And
that
she's,
works.
she's talking to us, but she don't know that she's talking to us. So, and all right, well, she's coming back. Okay. So here's the list of folks we got, and I'm introducing you to the audience. So just raise your hand. Carlos Pollard.
Here.
Nevada. Tamisha Walker. Is Tamisha here? There she is down there. Oh, your hair different. Oh, your hair the same. Okay. Tamisha, Richmond, California. All right. Heather says she's going to join in from East Valley. Also, Eleuthera Lish from Seattle, Washington. Davita Briscoe is also from Seattle, Washington when she comes back. Gary Thompson. Gary, where? I thought I saw, did I see Gary?
I'm here, Doc.
There, down in Pasadena, California. I don't know if Rose is on, your sidekick. She said she was going to show, but I don't think she's here. Tamiko Ferguson from Kingston, Ontario, Canada. Y'all Canadians must think we crazy down here, but that's a whole, we'll get to that. Okay. Llewellyn Sykes, Cape Town, South Africa. All right. Maurice Scott. Maurice Scott. Is Maurice here? Where's Maurice?
Yes, Maurice is here.
There he is. Maurice Scott, South Bend, Indiana. Khalid Alahi, also Richmond, California. And first of all, you guys don't get to see each other very often. Well, so why don't everybody say hi to everybody real quick, so y'all won't be sending messages. So Eleuthera,
Hey, everybody.
everybody say hi to everybody, because some of you, we ain't had a retreat in so long. The only good time you get to see each other. So, okay.
Hey, everybody.
Thank you for joining us tonight to have this talk. And a couple things. Let's just drop this right now. Apparently, after the House has passed its bill on guns and some portion of gun control legislation, understand today that the Senate has reached. There's a group of 10 senators, I believe, who have reached a bipartisan agreement in principle on some measures to take. My quick read is, it ain't nearly doing enough, but that's okay. At least, but that'll play out as it is. I personally have no faith in the politicians. That's just me. I have no faith, which is why I want to talk to people that's actually doing the work, because I don't want to talk to them, because as far as I'm concerned, they don't really care. So I'd rather talk to you, because each of you in your wherever you are really doing the work of stopping the violence. And so that's who I want to talk to. Here's how we're going to start. I had and some of you may have seen this, but I had a conversation with I guess you might say he's a gun violence researcher. He's an expert. And, you know, we try to give this a live and free description to everybody we come in contact with. We want to talk to them about it. What do you think? And for me, I wanted to see if this thing that we advocate, just a live free prescription, how it would resonate with somebody who is a gun violence researcher. So he's in Garen Wintemute. He's an emergency medical physician at UC Davis, where he is the director of violence prevention research. He conducts research in the fields of injury epidemiology and the prevention of firearm violence. He is named a Hero of Medicine by Time magazine. And he's one of the few public health experts researching gun violence in the United States. And he's actually funded a lot of his research with his own money. That's pretty good. All right. So anyway, so I wanted to just lay this on him because this is our take, this amazing, wonderful live free prescription. So you guys have heard me say this, but let's listen to me give this our spiel to him, see his thoughts, and then we'll come back and begin the discussion from there. So let's do that. Okay, Garen, how are you? Nice to meet you. First of all,
nice to meet you. Thanks for having me.
You did, sure. Just like right. That. Tell me what you're interested. I understand. You're really interested in. I mean, we're a violence prevention organization, right?
Yep.
And so our job it's always been challenging. I don't think it's ever been more challenging than now.
I couldn't agree more.
And my take on it is a couple of things, the usual stuff, but, coming out of COVID, I've heard that, let me just tell you this. I was talking to this school district in Baltimore that wants me to come out there and work with their staff. And the lady in the district office said, they're seeing a new strain of kid.
How many times have we heard that?
A new strain.
Yeah, and I got it.
What meant is they seem to have, she's saying they have no filter, they're acting out more than ever,
sure.
Blah, 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 that sort of thing. And I guess it sort of mirrors the daily reports, hourly reports at the same time when it comes to violence, particularly gun violence, but that seems to be the only kind of violence that's going on. So, so we're responding as best we can to the call, but it seems to be, just totally out of control.
Yeah.
So that's sort of my opening statement on what's your thoughts about that?
Sure. So a little bit of origin story, and then we'll jump right to today. I'm an emergency medicine physician. I still practice. I'm 70. I still practice medicine, and have been doing violence prevention research for as long as I've been practicing medicine, which is 40 years now. And still see people who are impacted by violence, either right that day or years earlier, because as we both know, the effects are long lasting. And like you, I agree that in some ways the job is harder than it has ever been, preventing violence. And at the moment, before coming on to talk with you, I was working on a couple of papers. I'm a researcher as well as a clinician, run a research program, looking at what I think, on top of everything else we've experienced the last few years, will be the advent of large-scale political violence in the United States. But as always, I think what brings the media to us, to you, to me, is a mass shooting. And we've certainly had a lot of those lately. Some of them have been hate crimes, and we can talk about them. A big part of my job is to remind people that mass shootings only account for about 2% of deaths from gun violence in the United States. And we need to remember the other 98% too.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's a great combination of being a physician that deals with violence. Because I mean, the talk went from being, I mean, it became a public health issue. And then, you know, a lot of doctors that jump in and say you should treat violence as one would disease. We actually call violence a disease here. And that's the framework we use. And we certainly treat it like a disease. I can remember a doctor at USC saying you should treat gang violence, the epidemic of gang violence, in all standards as one would a disease. And then here's one that'll surprise you, but maybe not. I got some quotes from gang members who said they were infected with this disease of violence. And they actually used the word disease, which, you know, and they said he also, this gang member also had cancer, and he said the disease of gangbanging was worse than cancer, and he said he caught it when he was 9. So it definitely changed or added to, I don't know so much changed our thinking about young people, because we were primarily young people, but you know, young people grow up to be grown-ups and older people, about the mindset, the infected mindset, we call it an infected mindset that they bring to this whole issue of violence. And we have developed what we call the Alive and Free prescription, which is as medical as we can make it around here. I mean, and it's the only thing that I've seen that actually cuts through a lot of the territorial and turf issues, and even national issues, you know, and country issues, and when it comes to violence, when one sees it in that way, because the way we framed it, you know, we have a list of risk factors, just like one would have a list of risk factors for heart disease. I mean, really, it's so medical, it's crazy. People are like, this is just like, I said, well, you know, that makes sense to you. And it allows me to work with people, you know, who think, well, this is just an Oakland thing, or this is just a white thing, or this is just a, you know, whatever issue there, this seems because much like, you know, COVID cuts across, and you know, heart disease cuts across. So it's been very, 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 very accepted by those who can, when they hear it. I will say this, and you help me, and then we can go on. I always say that among this list of risk factors, the biggest risk factor of all, for me, is clearly firearms. The biggest risk factor of all. And the way I say that to people is, I grew up in a, you know, pretty tough. The TV and radio and movie name is South Central Los Angeles. Grew up in that location. But I always tell my young people, and this blows their mind, I never went to a funeral of a peer when I was a kid. I never went to a funeral. Now, we had a lot of fights. We probably had every other risk factor and then some. But nobody died. And I asked them why. And they said, what? And after a while I said, look, it's simple. Hardly anybody had a gun. I mean, there were plenty of sticks and whatever stuff, but there weren't. And actually, you know, we had a lot of fights, and it was almost considered cowardly and unmanly if you had a gun. So I started working with these kids, and it went, you know, everybody had a gun. And now, when all the kids had guns, because they thought that, you know, they needed it for protection or were to survive or anything else. So Now everybody's got a gun.
Yeah.
And my phrase is, and I'll stop here and I'll let you run with this. The problem with guns is that guns begat guns. It's almost biblical, you know. And if that's the number one risk factor, and there's more guns and more guns and bigger guns and bigger guns, then the mindset is triply important. So it seems that people believe that the way to settle their problems is with violence, and to protect themselves against something, I call it the just in case thing. That's where it seems to me to be today. Now I'll let you go with that. That's just my quick reasoned take on this whole thing, and see what you think about that.
I completely agree. We're going to have fun today. One of the myths is that America is a uniquely violent society, or that there are people among us who are uniquely violent. There's a tendency to put all the blame on the person. But if you look at the data, we are not a uniquely violent society. If you look at across countries, if you look at rates of assault, ours are sort of midland across wealthy nations. Where we stand out is in our rates of fatal violence. And the difference is not that we're more violent, it's that we have easy access to a technology that changes the outcome.
Yeah.
And you've just described within the course of your lifetime how that change occurred. People used to fight, but they fought, and maybe somebody would get cut up or something, but people didn't die, and now they do. And tragedy on top of tragedy, for young men as for anybody else, the main reason these days to have a gun is for protection. That's been true for a long time. But one of the things that researchers have looked into is, this is not my work, I'm describing other people's work, but if you ask young men in cities who have guns, why do you have a gun? A lot of them will say, because everybody else does. But if you ask everybody, it turns out that not that many people do. And the people who do have them are afraid they'll be second to the draw and they'll die as a result. But it turns out the rates of gun access and gun carrying and stuff are sometimes lower than people think they are. But yes, the single biggest driver for acquiring a firearm is fear, and principally of other people with firearms.
We did a gun buyback program because I was on the police commission here for a number of years.
Yep.
Trying to do something about the police and their guns.
Yeah.
Their youths. And I remember, and we paid, it was great. It was around Christmas time, so, we paid $100 for a firearm and $200 for an assault weapon.
Yeah.
But I remember the people that came in here to get the money and turn in their gun. I had little old ladies with, people I didn't even think. I mean, everybody had a gun, and they had. Some lady brought in a flintlock. I mean, it was just crazy.
Yeah,
crazy. And I was just astounded by, I was used to the folks I deal with, with their firearms, but the range, that's what I'm looking for, the range of people that had guns. And then of course the type of guns, we got assault weapons, we got, 38s, we got 9mm, we got Tech 9s, we got, we got all kind of guns in here. And basically, like you said, they all said it for the same reason, it's for protection, it's for protection, it's for protection, it's for protection. And my biggest concern is that anytime, and it's all driven by fear, absolutely. And depending on where you live, there are sayings that people use, with the young people I work with, I don't want to be caught slipping. That's their phrase. I'd rather be caught with it than without it. Other folks might say, a burglar might come into my home, or just it's on the next person's mind, or I just need it just in case. I just need it for opportunity in case something happens. The problem with that is that every time, I mean, of course, we know all the stories. I'm not even gonna deal with all the stories of people having guns in the home, and it turns out, it was their son or daughter got hold of the gun. I mean, there's a story about that like every few days, right? A little kid playing with the gun that his parent had, and and they got it, and they're pointing at each other, and they kill them. Somebody coming to the door, and of course, the person is, just in case this is a burglar, they don't really go see if it's a burglar. So, and the guy just may be trying to get my car got stopped and he's really coming in, and they shoot him first. The whole thing now is don't investigate, shoot first, be just in case. So it changes completely your mindset. That's the whole thing for me. It changes your mindset. And every time somebody, and incidents like this happens, gun sales go up 1 billion%. So I had when you said the level of gun, all I see is how many people are getting guns all the time. Now, when you say to me that it's really not that bad, that's hard for me to believe. I take your word for it because you're a researcher. But when I talk, most people I talk to, they got one. And, they got it, just in case. And the more armed the populace you're going to have, because it definitely changes the way you think. What happens is that people feel like guns are the answer. I got the answer. And when you don't have one, you got to think differently. You got to act differently. You got to use you got to use another way because you don't have it. And, when you have a totally armed populace, and that's my concern now with the pendulum isn't even the middle now. It's someone open carry is it. Open carry is it. It's gone. I mean, you have states like Arizona and Texas, but it's becoming more and more common. And I think Indiana just did an open carry thing. So literally, it's gonna be like the Wild Wild West around here. I mean, I can go into Starbucks in Arizona. Everybody's got a gun on their hip. I'm not staying there because I don't know on that person's mind. So I don't. All these gun violence initiatives that people are screaming and hollering about, when they're not going to regulate firearms at all. There's no way out of this, as far as I'm concerned, unless you get to the mindset. But if the mindset is mostly driven by fear, and that's my job, is to deal with the mindset, because obviously you got a Second Amendment, which people are going to claim their right. By the way, they never claim their responsibility. They only claim their right. I always say the founders should have written a Bill of Responsibilities to go with the Bill of Rights, because all I hear is the people talk about my right, my right. I never hear about their responsibility. What's your thoughts about? Let me just add one other thing, and I'm doing most of the talking. You're supposed to be doing all the talking. It was interesting to hear you say that the violence in America, because the feeling of people, especially somebody like me, is that America is a violent country. It's always been a violent country. It was born in violence. It violence against Native Americans. Certainly slavery was violent. So I almost think violence, just like race, is part of the DNA of America. It's just it's just interesting to hear you say it's not really like that. And it's hard for me to believe that.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's not like that. I'm only saying, and I agree with you about the tendency toward violence being a characteristic of our species, right around the planet. We're not. It's one thing to say we're not more violent than other wealthy societies. It's another to say we're not violent. violence is endemic right around the planet. Here's how bad it's going to get. I mean, to your point about gun purchasing and stuff. And actually, let me go back. When I was saying guns aren't as widespread as people think they are, that's specific to research that's been done with youth in major cities, where they think everybody they know has a gun, and it turns out that's not true. But more broadly, and we have more guns in civilian hands in the United States than we have people. And this is something our group tracks. We went on a gun buying binge beginning in January of 2020, when we saw the pandemic coming and people were afraid, so they started buying guns. And then the pandemic hit, and then a bunch of other things happened that we could go through. But we ended up, from the beginning of 2020 to almost to the end of 2021, almost 2 full years, running 50% or more above expected numbers of gun purchases in the United States. At the end of 2021, it sort of came to a close, but now in 2022, the gap between the number of guns we're buying and the much lower number of guns we'd be expected to buy based on historical trends is widening again. So the upshot of this is this. We're conducting and living through a huge national experiment on the question, what happens when you flood a society with guns all of a sudden? We have done that, and we now have no choice but to live through the aftermath.
Or die through the aftermath.
Yeah, well, many of us will. And in my judgment, not by coincidence, that spike in purchasing I just talked about is without precedent in history. At the same time, we had an increase in homicide from the United States in the United States from 2019 to 2020 that was greater than we've ever seen in history. Records go back 100 years. I've looked at those records. It was the greatest year-over-year increase we'd ever seen. And 2021 was worse than 2020. And 2022 looks to be, not by as wide a margin, worse than 2021. Right. But the wild card is this is a federal election year. And hate is walking the country in a way it has not for a while, I think. And the thing that concerns a lot of people, I suspect you and me, is that we may see the confluence of hate above the table and political violence all at once. And we may see a kind of violence in the United States that we haven't seen in 60 years.
All right, go ahead. Talk. That was a gun expert. I always like laying our stuff on somebody who's never heard it before, and he was like, "Oh yeah, yeah." But I guess the last statement, what did he say? What happens when you flood a society with guns? That was like, and we've never seen anything like this before. By the way, this is before Uvalde that we had this conversation, and I think it was a week after Buffalo. And of course, there have been so many mass shootings. You know, I don't know if there's been any this weekend, but of course, the weekend's not over. So, yeah, well, what do you think about what you heard? What you heard from Mr. Wintemute and this whole thing with guns and gun violence? So, go ahead. Y'all can talk now. You've been listening for 15, 20 minutes now, so now you get to talk. And you're all over the world, so. Gun violence in America. We in a spot here. So who wants to begin?
Well, I'll go first. I think his last. I mean, everything he said and you were saying was I was listening, but in the end when he talked about that spike from 2019 and 2021, that kind of struck me, and the fact of the 2% mass shootings. Then he talked about what about the other 98%? Dead on. I mean, and because we didn't hear about mass shootings over this weekend, but we still hear about every time I cut on the news this weekend or saw a Zoom link, it was about a shooting, particularly in San Diego. We're up 80% in gun violence deaths since January. And we're seeing it across the board from domestic to robbery to gang violence. And so I know we talk about the mass shooting, but the other 90%, 98% is we got to talk about that and talk about the long-lasting trauma behind these shootings that just last forever. I mean, I'm 50-something. Well, I'm gonna say I'm 50-something. I'm gonna be 60 in about 2 months. I know I look good and everything, but I'm still feeling the effects of my father being murdered at 18. So I know the long-lasting trauma effects. It still haunts me, you know. So that part stuck with me.
Okay, anybody else's thoughts on what you heard? Thought you heard from the expert. Oh, Luther, I see your hand is up. I'm not looking for hands. I'm looking for, just go ahead, baby girl.
Hi, so I was thinking 120.5 guns per 100 American citizens.
Yep.
And he said there's more guns than there are people. And
Yep.
I'm thinking about how we talk always in Alive and Free about what weakens the immune system of a community is the proliferation of weapons of war. But now we're not just talking about a community in a small construct. We're talking about a weakened American society and the proliferation of weapons of war. And only 9 states that ban assault rifles. And so just thinking about 42 states where that hate that's above the table and the political violence that's governing everything and the proliferation of weapons and this tipping point of, mass shootings that also rattle everybody into strapping up. And what he also said was that it's not the young people, which was really interesting, thinking about if it's not the young people, then we got to think about who it is, and who it is, a lot of people that look like me that are espousing and emboldened in their hate and that infection that's spreading. So I'm just thinking a lot about that, but that it's not the young people, that they think everybody has a weapon, but it isn't necessarily those young people that are part of that demographic of, 120 weapons per 100 people. Just also thinking about how relevant always the Alive and Free prescription is, and how many other people other than our young people need to be hearing it. So glad to hear who you're talking to.
Yeah.
And I know you don't like to talk to politicians, so you deputize people like myself and Davida who go work in government and
You talk to them.
yeah, all right, we climb the wall and we infiltrate, and then we take the job inside. So just thinking about that, had a conversation with the White House this last week, and we're hosting some folks from around the country from the White House peer exchange. And so it's another opportunity to put the prescription into people's minds. So really just taking that call to action.
It's interesting, and I heard that loud and clear when he said, oh, the perception is that, every Pookie and Ray Ray got a gun, but they don't. But that's what they had you thinking. And it was interesting here, researcher says, no, but everybody else got one. So they selling you that, and, like they the ones you got to be scared. No, and then when we hit the political balance again, that was another out there. Somebody else, jump in, talk, speak, go, Ray, who's next? Y'all know this is live, so you can't be waiting.
I'll go. Yeah, I think it was really interesting, like his comments about, especially about how gun sales had went up during the pandemic. And what I noticed, even in my own neighborhood, was that the schools were closed, the libraries was closed on one side of the street, but on the other side of the street, the gun shops were still open. And so I'm wondering, how is gun sales going up 70% during a pandemic when you're supposed to be at home? And why do you need a gun during a pandemic? I couldn't wrap my head around the businesses that were closed by the governor, but the gun shops was a essential business. So I couldn't wrap my head around that. But
that's a deep thought.
I just couldn't get it. I was just like, okay, so the gun stores is an essential business that need to be open during the pandemic. So But another thing that I think about the Alive and Free prescription, just I'm so glad that I have the framework, because I take that into every job, every position, everything that I do. I look at it through that lens now, through the medical lens. But one thing that I heard was they said on the website, it said gun ownership is a risk factor for homicide in the home. And so I just was on the phone call with the medical examiner last week, and there were 7 suicides in one day.
Right.
7 suicides in one day, and 6 of them were with a firearm.
Right. Right.
And we hadn't even made it to the end of the day.
Right.
That was around 2:00.
Yeah.
So you're telling me that in my job, you know, we are doing everything that we can to close loopholes, to, you know, 10-day waiting periods. We're talking about banning AR-15 gun sales to people under 21. So we're doing all that we can, but it's not a cure-all, and it's not enough. But I definitely agree that the more guns that we have, the proliferation of weapons, mass weapons in our communities is what is destroying us. And so I look at it through the lens of the prescription all the time, that guns being a risk factor, and doing as much as we can to educate our young people with the prescription. If I can make the whole city a Alive and Free city, if I could get the prescription in every school, I mean,
well, you know, that's interesting, because that's your goal, for folks to be alive and free. That's not everybody's goal. I mean, the gun industry wants to make money. It ain't, that's not everybody's goal. You know, it's like the cigarette industry wanted to make money. And your comment about suicides, the choice of weapon to do the job is a gun. I mean, overwhelmingly. And the guns are usually found in somebody's home. So yeah, good point. Somebody else react to what he said, we said. Khalid, I see you sitting there looking like your wise self as always, brother.
Well, I got a lot to say about it, but this is just my theory. He said something about a new strain of children.
That's what the lady in Baltimore told me. Yeah.
Yeah, new strain of children, but it's a new strain of parenting. It's a new strain of parenting going on, and that's a whole conversation in itself about what the parenting is producing nowadays. But I'm gonna start off. I'm gonna go back a little bit, and this is gonna hit the whites and the blacks. It's a new term that's going on. The new. So you got them white folks listening to that rap, killer rap. And then it's like you got the brothers in jail right now doing double digits, coming out, committing murder the second and third week that they home now. And after doing 10 years or better, they coming home now, committing murders, recruiting. They are in the neighborhoods. There's several serial killers walking around. So now what makes it vital is we have to have, if we really want to start addressing this violence on the streets, we have to start now really having a proper program inside prison now, because they coming out doing double digits, going right back to jail. It's several young men that I know of that's been gone for 20 years, come right out and commit murders. Their names start popping again. And I figured it out like this. They got the phones inside, you know, where they watching videos, and they got the video while the brothers is in there doing time. They on FaceTime. They got the phone passing it around in parties. So these dudes is doing time at all of these parties in jail. They ain't missing nothing. So by the time they come home, they haven't learned nothing. They was up on everything. They had a phone in there, so they never got the treatment, and they coming out committing crimes and recruiting people. So, and then when I say the new nigga, that's when you got the, you know, because I'm seeing a lot of more white kids call each other. They listen to these killer rap songs.
You know, I'm going to take that word. So say ends from now on, because it's right. Every time you say it drives a stake through my heart.
Ain't that something? But And that's what they're doing.
I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised.
They emulating that stuff, man, and carrying them things out, you know. So it's just that's just my thing. And it's just a whole way that we got to go in there. So it's a new strain of parenting that's allowing the kids to grow up and fester into what we see and play out in the streets, commit the making of a killer. Then our brothers coming out of jail, they don't have the proper adequate counseling to come home. And so they're coming home after 10, 12 years, 20 years and committing a crime 2-3 weeks after they've been out, killing again. So something is drastically wrong. And then they got the killer rap songs. If you not, everybody used to be one to, and then I'm gonna get off. Everybody used to want to be a basketball player, athlete, or if they did want to be a rapper, the lyrics used to be fantasy rapping. I got a Rolls Royce, I got a Benz, and all of this stuff. They don't really have none of that stuff. Now it's, I'll blow your brains out. I'll do this, I'll do that. I got this type of gun. I'm doing this. We killed your whole family. And, you know, it's who the most violent. And that's the new deal. If you're not doing violent rap and you from the inner city and you don't have a gun, then you ain't no man. That's just how it's going.
And I think it's been proven that the biggest purveyors and listeners to and buyers of that music is the white population. So
yeah, exactly.
That surprised me. Yeah. Thank you, Khalid. Thank you, Khalid. Any more reaction to what he said? Oh, Tamisha, you got your mic off, so you ready to talk. Good to see you. What we call you? City council.
Yes.
Person, woman. Well,
yeah.
Go ahead. And you weren't on there, so you're the only politician other than Shaman I will talk to. Go ahead.
No, it feels like you don't talk to politicians. I was like,
but you're a public servant. That's different.
Public service, right? One, I appreciate the conversation. I actually had an opportunity to meet this gentleman on a call with Mark Desagne, who is our Congress member, who got a group of us together in Contra Costa to talk about what are some of the strategies that we could use to combat gun violence. And through the conversation, I quickly understood that we weren't talking just about community-based violence. And so when just even looking at that interview, when I thought about, I also picked up on that this idea of a new strain of young person or a new strain of young person. When I think about a strain, I think about a virus. And when I think about that, I'm wondering what young people are they talking about? And when you said that all of our goals should be to save lives, anybody's goals should be to save lives, it made me think about the circle of human concern and who survives within that circle of human concern and who lives are we really trying to save, right? And then I thought about some of the context around our culture not necessarily being a violent culture, which I disagree because the culture is violent uniquely, as violent institutionally, economically, and narratively, which is why we have to be careful about the kind of language we use when we talk about our communities and young people. And then I also thought about that, you know, I lost a brother to gun violence. And when I hear you, Doc, talk about the mindset, it really is about like where it's so important to do that work in our communities. Because the work on the mind in our communities has been done for years. And so we got a lot of work to do to undo that, right? To bring the human value back, right? To value human life, to see each other, or even just to start working with young people, just the work that you all do that is so important. And when you say, what is the right versus the responsibility, is like, yeah, technically we all had a right to bear arms, but what is our responsibility to save lives, right? And I think that's why everybody is here today. When I think about that, what he said about mass shootings being only 2% related to gun violence, I think about since January to May, 17,208 deaths, 76,000 injury shootings not related, not ending in a death, 95,000 suicides related to gun violence, 213 mass shootings, 141 shootings ending in the death of a child, and 299 shootings based on other factors. And when I look at the overall data and I think about the community that I live in, homicide shootings are down, but injury shootings are up across the board. There are not just people dying from gun violence, there are people surviving gun violence. And what is the duty we have to make sure that those survival rates don't end in more homicide rates? And that's why I think the work that Alive and Free does around the mind is so important, because if you can convince me that I need to be able to have a firearm to protect myself, which isn't just young people, which is why the purchase of firearms are up. What really protects and makes communities safe is some of the questions that I have. But I know that we can't just not do anything, which is why the city of Antioch, for the first time, went after Cal VIP monies to be able to think about what does violence prevention even look like in a city where the only life that is valued doesn't look like me.
Mm-hmm. You know, Tanisha, America, that's why I framed this gun violence in America. America's the only place that has this problem. I mean, there are a couple of countries, I can't remember the other two, but as far as what they call industrialized nations, I don't like using the word civilized, because I don't think that we're more civilized than anybody else, to be honest with you. We're uniquely the only problem. In fact, other countries looking at it, what the hell are y'all doing over there? Y'all.
Uh-oh.
I think he's frozen.
Yeah, he's frozen. Well, until he comes back, there he is. So Dr. Marshall, you were frozen for a second and we didn't hear. So if you could back it up just a little bit.
Well, I'm sorry.
You said, what the hell are y'all? And then you froze.
What the hell y'all do you do when he said what happens when you flood a society with guns? I mean, it's only in America that everybody's been flooded with guns. Everyone else in the world has at least looked at it, right? And we're being bitten. Seriously, no, not bitten. We're being, what's the word? I want to turn the gun on itself. We're being killed by the Second Amendment. Is that a good way to put it? Because saying that everybody can have one is, and you're right, there is no responsibility. We have a society that's flooded with guns. There are more guns with people. And you know, he says, you know, we're in this, and he says it's going to get worse before it gets better. So it was good to hear him say that, you know, because that's just a fascinating question that we're up against. And you can liken it to, you know, a disease that's in the world. I mean, COVID is the latest, or AIDS. And at least you develop a cadre of people to go in and address it. And there was some kind of will to address it. But that is just a fascinating thing that he proposed. And it only is happening here in the so-called, quote, greatest country in the world. Well, and your hand was up. Go right ahead. Good to see you.
Good morning, everybody.
Man, every time I see you, I said, this brother is a true street soldier. He is in Cape Town, South Africa, and you were with us all the time. You know we love. Let's give him the well in the hand. You know we love the brother. We just love the brother.
I don't think that is needed anymore. Good morning, everybody from a cold and wet Cape Town. You know, it's like 10 degrees Celsius here, and we've had a lot of rain overnight. And I trust you're praying for our country. Last couple of months, we had problems, floods. You know, I'm sure you saw on the news, the KwaZulu-Natal area has been decimated by floods. So there's no end to our challenges. You know, and this is quite an interesting conversation. Doc, when you speak about, you know, America is killing itself. And unfortunately, you know, you cannot look in South Africa in isolation, especially coming out of apartheid, and guns and arms has been so entrenched in our psychic.
Yes.
And if you look across the continent, it's not only South Africa, but across the country and the continent. We look at countries where war and post-war has dominated our society. So we might not have money to buy guns, but we have armed cases across South Africa and across the continent that was used in the liberation struggles. And in our case, especially South Africa, I'm not sure if you're aware, but we are the second highest country in terms of gun violence in the world after the USA. Second. And the biggest concern for us is that we only have about 58 million people compared to 300 million in the USA. So if you look at our statistics relative to the USA, I think we're probably most highest ranked in terms of the number of people. But unfortunately, in your case, most of your guns that's flooding the streets are, I would say, economic, because of economic reasons linked to wealth. In our case, in South Africa, if you look at our history, our policing practices, where the police has excessively used guns and violence, to stop violence in the country. So we're sitting with a society where violence is just entrenched. There's a lack of transformation in our police service, especially after apartheid. And our biggest challenge that I would say, and it's interesting to listen to the speaker earlier about 2021 and 2022, how violence has increased. And we've also seen similar trends, but the trends in the killings and the violence was mostly driven through unemployment, driven through poor education, driven to poor infrastructure in our country, where people has gone to the street because they wanted to just to survive. And it's sad, when there's an increase in violence and especially violent crimes because of people are just hungry. And that is our reality in South Africa. People are killing each other because of hunger and just the fact of people being surviving. So we're not seeing the mass shootings at our schools, but South Africa is third in terms of school shootings in the world, because we kill about 10 or 12 per day, and that mounts up. So we might not have 20 or 30 being killed on a single day, but we have 10, 9 per day. And that increases on a daily basis in our country. So sadly, you getting all the publication and the spotlight in the USA because of your economic status, but sadly, the same things are happening in South Africa as well. And the political dispensation is also a big reason. This year we have what we call the ruling government ANC's presidential elections in December. And we're already starting to see the increase of violence because of political power. And of course, it's also linked to corruption, because there's a sense that if you're in political power, you have access to finance, access to government resources. And we're seeing, all these killings within the political parties, getting rid of opponents and setting up, mass killings in small rural villages, so that there's the political cloud in certain areas. And it's only going to increase in South Africa because of the stance where we don't elect a president. We choose a party, and the leader of that party becomes the president of the country. And because of that, we see a lot of infighting in the ruling party nowadays. But our challenges are so much, elevated and more about the challenge that you have. And because of this whole socio-economic policy and the challenge that we find ourselves in today. So keep on praying for us.
We're gonna do more than pray. We're gonna live and free it.
That's right. We need a live and free as well.
Live and free. We're gonna pray.
And a lot of prayer.
Live and free. I remember you said, this article, you keep me informed that it says the first 3 months of the year, of this year, was it this year, had seen more than 6,000 people murdered in South Africa. Is that correct?
This year only this year.
Wow. And then you sent me this video of your neighborhood, and I remember that clearly. It looked like a movie, and it was your neighborhood, and guys were out there. And I was trying to find it, to give it to Ann the show, but man, I mean, that was, and you and I have ridden through those neighborhoods. I remember when I was there, you took me back to your neighborhood, and it looked like, I knew it was real, but it looked just like something in a movie. That must just, man, that was, wow.
And sadly, Doc, in some of our neighborhoods, we're not teaching, education anymore. We're teaching kids how to fall down when they hear a gunshot. Right. So we are teaching going on, and the students are under the desk, under the tables. The first sound of gunshot, you learn to drop and roll. Drop and roll under the desk, under your bed. And then we stay there for about, 10, 15 minutes. Right. Then we get up again, teaching continues. And we have gangs literally ruling neighborhoods where the police are basically on the outskirts. They basically picking up bodies because as soon as they get close to the violence, a gunshot goes over their head. You stay behind. Let us sort out our business. And in some of our communities, it's happening every single day. And it's stuff that you don't see, you don't hear it on the television, you don't see it being discussed. But that's the reality of a lot of our communities. Here's 6,000 deaths. A lot of the deaths now are also related to racketeering. For example, we heard about last week, I heard that, I saw a report that there's development going on in certain areas, houses being built, but the contractors have stopped working because the gangs are threatening them with protection if you want to work in our area. So now we're not getting development because contractors and construction companies can't go in. And because of the proliferation of guns in our areas, we think our communities being stopped and development being stopped because of violence in certain areas. And it's so sad that we taking 10 steps back. Teaching is not happening in classes because of gun violence in certain communities. I'll try to send Ann that video later on.
Thank you. Violence doesn't work anywhere. Who hasn't had
Llewellyn, my prayers, collectively, we just need to continue to keep you and your community in prayer for your safety and well-being, for the children. When I was teaching at John Muir, kids that came to school in the neighborhood where I taught, in the neighborhood where they lived, which was just up down the street and around the corner, they knew what to do at the point when the gun shooting would begin. They knew where to go. And this is like kindergarten through 5th grade. Kids knew what to do to keep themselves safe and protected from gunshots in the area where I worked. But I need to say also, I need to just address Davita's comment. I share your thoughts around the need for guns during a pandemic. What you gonna do? Shoot the virus? I didn't get it. And then, I mean, it's like, why do you need more guns for? I didn't. That made no sense to me, unless there was an anticipation that somebody was gonna break in and steal the toilet paper that everybody was trying to collect. I mean, because it was, you know what I'm saying? Because it was just crazy at the start. But then I need to say to Tamisha that I really appreciate hearing the data, because when we talk in terms of percents, and Llewellyn, you did this too, when we talk in terms of percents, we do not get a clear picture of what's really going on. And it stood out to me too when he said 2% of all the shootings are mass shootings. And we know that the number of mass shootings so far in the United States is almost 250. Well, that was at the time he reported that. It's probably more than that now. But when you give the numbers and the data, you can see just how much destruction is going on. So I appreciate hearing the data. That is power. in sharing the numbers so people can really see what's going on.
Here's another number.
And then the question, posing the questions. What do we need to do? Now what? Let's come up with a plan and a process. So yeah.
Speaking of a number, here's one that, and I tried not to. Anyway, let me quote the number. Lady E, a couple of crazy numbers I got. What was the one about? Hold on. They did a poll and they asked, can I find it? I think, was it the 46%? Oh, here it is. The striking new poll on guns. CBS did a poll, and it said that 44%, and this in case it was of Republicans in this case, said that mass shootings are something we have to accept as part of a free society.
Oh.
Wait a minute. Wait. 44% of Republicans said that we have to accept it. So we just got to accept the fact that we're going to die, right? Now, majority said that 56% said that mass shooting is something we can prevent and stop if we really try. But the fact that half of that group said this is something we have to live with, what they really meant is something that we have to die with. So, you know, you are about language, ladies tell. That don't mean we got to live with it.
Well, that's what your researcher just said. I mean, he just said, yeah, we probably will. Like what?
Right, of course. And of course, this man goes on to say that's pure bunk because there are other plenty of free countries in the world that not have a mass shooting problem like we do in the United States. That was a fascinating number to hear. One of the tough things doing about gun policy is California actually has some pretty some of the stronger gun laws in the United States, but you know, you can just go in Nevada and get any gun you want. So that's part of the issues that we deal with, this uneven strategy across, which is people or something that Congress tried to do something. Carlos, you haven't had a chance. Maurice, you haven't had a chance. You haven't had a chance to say something on your thoughts on everything we've heard so far.
Yes, Dr. Marshall, I want to comment on the percentage of increase in gun sales and also the increase in homicide. I actually had a conversation with a therapist, my therapist that works with me. We actually watch the news, CNN and different other news sources, and beginning in the morning before clients come in. And they started to talk about the gun violence in America and also the legislation too. So he questioned me in regards to, you know, what my perception is in regards to what's going on. I advised him that, you know, we work with probation parole kids, and we do a lot of programming with a lot of gang members. We go into institutions, so we see a lot of violence. So I advised him, I do have a weapon, and he knows I have a weapon. He asked me how many. I said a couple, and then he started elaborating on the assault rifles. And I was kind of I'm kind of on the fence with the assault rifles. I do have a couple of those, and he started to question me, why do I have an assault rifle? You know, and I asked him, I'm in a therapy session right now, but I answered the question, and I said to protect myself and protect my family. And then he said, but why do you need an actual assault rifle? And then he said, why do you use it? And I was like, I don't know. I mean, I like the control of it. I like the power. And it just reminded me of the core roots of the disease of put Alive and Free when I was asking those particular questions. It's like, and I started to question myself, do I really need that type of weapon? And and also when we were in San Diego, I mean, we were doing the training, and Lady Estelle came in and she asked, you know, when all the police officers was there, and everybody had a gun. And Dr. Marsh said, why does everybody have a gun? We're in a police station. You know, it reminded me, we're so comfortable at just carrying guns. And he reminded me, guns do promote violence. And what you said, Dr. Marshall, in regards to it changes your mindset. I know that when I have a gun, different instances, I may handle instances different with a gun, and my mindset changes. It's more so, let me get my gun and think about how I'm going to protect myself, opposed to let me see if I can talk my way out of the situation. And And that unfortunately is what's going on all over America. And they've had the correlation in regards to the increase in gun sales and homicides. So I can understand that correlation in regards to how that relates to changing your mindset, the increase in gun sales and the homicide. And I think it's a worldly problem. I think that I mean, it's about the whole core issue, war, everything. It's power, control, domination, materialism. It's a worldly issue, and it's one of the things in which we got to, instead of using guns and weapons, we need to be able to sit down and resolve our issues by communication, understand what's going on with the other people on the other side. So it's an ongoing battle, but I mean, it's most definitely a challenge.
Carlos, I want to thank you for not bringing it to the training.
And I have to say, when I realized that everybody in that room had a gun, I freaked.
Yeah.
Because, you know, when you say you take on a different persona, there's something that's different about you when you're carrying that something. And so I liken that to when I don't have money, I feel a whole lot different than I do when I've got money in my pocket. When I've got money in my pocket, it's different. I can't imagine having a gun. Being around somebody with a gun, you know, there's like, I'm not willing to have a conversation, or if it weren't the fact that I was on duty, I'm out. I can talk to you put me on the screen. I just don't want to, you know, because when do you think? And then when you think, how do you think? You know what I'm saying? We go to that where we have got the power and the control, which I think it's just, I think we just don't think. It's just kind of horrible to me. And then we live in this world of hate, and there's no trust. There's so much dislike. It's so easy to hate. And then, I'm getting ready to say it, Dr. Marshall. I'm getting ready to say it. Here I go.
I know how you are. You know, we all know how you are, lady.
We quick to get off. And then we're going to jump back. And then how do we say it? How do they say, I'm feeling a certain kind of way in my feelings and all kind of stuff. And then next thing you know, it's all bad. You know, and we didn't think. It's like, oh my goodness. I don't know. It's just a lot. It's just a lot. I think that we need to think before we put ourselves in a position where we are sorry that we didn't think.
One of the things he said, and two lines stood out for me. One was the one about what happens when you flood a society with guns. The other said the single biggest driver is fear. And all of us who work with, and Luther, you've been involved in this, and I think Davida has also, and certainly me on the police commission, and Carlos, you've done some work with us. We do everything we can to regulate police around their firearm use. I mean, it's the huge thing. I mean, it's not a small thing. We go in there and, you know, time and distance, when to pull one. And well, I mean, we are seriously concerned about an armed group called the police and how they deal with firearms. So we have at least attempted to regulate police when it comes to their firearms. It doesn't look like we're trying to regulate anything when it comes to private citizens with firearms. We're not trying to do anything, you know. And the people make these analogies about cars and airline pilots, and they come up with all of these things, except, you know, I've heard these mass shootings are to do with, I've heard them equated to women's rights. Isn't that the craziest thing? Somebody said, one of these guys, they ain't even trying to sound like they make sense. I've heard, what else has I've heard? I just heard some crazy stuff. I mean, just all kinds of things about these people who are just running for office. So we got an issue when, you know, in fact, I remember that piece I wrote for the Huffington Post. What do you do when everybody's got a gun? What do you do? And if the driver is fear, the driver is fear. So go ahead, lady.
Well, and I just want to thank Carlos for sharing.
Yeah.
I want to thank you for sharing that. And then I know that we haven't heard anything from Tamiko. And And I just want to make sure that you know we look forward to hearing your voice as well.
And Maurice, I don't think we heard from
And
Tamiko.
Maurice
So,
got his
Tamiko, you
hand.
start because you're in Canada and they look at, you got a prime minister up there who's look like he wants to at least do something.
He's trying, I think. I think the thing that stood out to me was the access piece.
Yeah.
Because, you know, we're in our community, we've had an increase in violence this year, I would say. We've had students involved in a few stabbings. And there's been a real rise, it seems, in folks carrying pellet guns that look like handguns. And that seems to be kind of the weapon of choice for kids to be carrying right now. But it's not, they just don't have, it's not like they're not going to make the same bad choices, you know, or react the same poor way, but they don't have the access to the guns to have them and to be carrying them and to use them. So, you know, all of the kids survived those stabbings. Whereas if it was a gun, they may not have. They likely would not have, right? And so that to me, and Canada's gun laws are federally regulated, so there isn't a difference between the provinces, which I think is helpful. So it's not like I can jump over to Alberta and pick something up, right? It's the same across the country. And so, you know, we don't have assault rifles, and we've had some guns that were previously allowed that have been newly classified as assault rifles, and they're looking at buybacks for those. And they have looked at sort of a freeze on handguns. So you can have a handgun if you have a permit and you are part of a target shooting club or something like that. But really up here, if you're not target shooting and you're not hunting, guns aren't seen in the same way. It's not. So if it's a little more regulated, there is, you know, a month cooling off period. There are a few things in place. If you have a history in the last 5 years of mental health issues and treatment, you can't get your gun permit, those kinds of things. So I think the access is just really different up here. And I think that makes a huge difference. So I don't know, once some place is flooded with everybody owning guns and they feel that that's their right, how do you then get those back and take away that right? I don't know how you do that.
Or they feel that that's just the price of living in a quote civilized society. No.
Well, I understand too that they're making junior instead. They got AR-15s and they're making JR-15s. Have you heard that? Okay.
I heard that one. JR?
Yes, making and providing JR-15s, and then you've got the ghost guns. So access is crazy.
Yeah. Okay, Maurice, you get to weigh in on this.
Yeah.
I'm glad I got y'all, boy, because y'all make me feel like, man, I need y'all, boy, please.
Well, since you left, Indiana, became an open carry state, and so what we've seen, the last 4 homicides in our city over the last couple of weeks have been 2 were women that killed each other that were over 40, and 2 were men that were over 40. So it was a shift, and it was a disagreement. They pulled out guns and shot each other, and so we're starting to see an uptick of older adults that's now arming themselves and solving disagreements by shooting each other. And all 4 of those incidents were everybody died. We had 4 other incidents where we have really good trauma center here, and so they were able to save their lives. But we've seen that. So one of the pivots that we started here is we said, what if we started to press some of our businesses to not allow people to bring their firearms into their restaurants or stores, at least almost like with the smoking ban, the smoking is not allowed. So it's no weapons allowed, because I'm like you, Doc. I walk in, everybody got a pistol, I'm leaving. I don't know how y'all gonna act.
I know I trust me. I'm good, but I don't know what you're gonna do. So, it's a different piece when everybody is packing from the 9-year-old to the 90-year-old. Everybody got a pistol, and so the mindset really has to shift, and man, yeah.
Driven by fear. Real or imagined.
That's right. Real
or imagined. I better get him before he's gonna get me. What do you even know if he's trying to get you?
Right.
Fear is horrible, man. And it's been fear that's driven America from day one. If we let the Black people free, they gonna do this. And if we do this, everything is up. And that's how you deal with your fear, is to get a gun and it drives your fears. And now, Maurice, they trying to give teachers in school. They propose that. Teachers in school.
Terrible idea.
Look. That's why everybody talk about doing homeschooling now, right? You can't.
Which is the other thing. Schools get targeted and people don't really stop and think about the drama and trauma that goes on in schools. Right. There are some teachers that absolutely do not need a gun because their little mouths and little attitudes. And some of these teachers, I'm not even gonna talk because it's just like, no, kids can be mean and the kids tell the teacher and the teacher doesn't do anything. So now the kids are mad at the teachers, and then the teachers, what, if they publicly humiliate a child?
Wow.
I think time and attention needs to be focused on schools and making sure that teachers there's only a handful of teachers that kids trust. And the rest of them,
think about this lady.
Could be a whole nother issue. And you're going to give them guns? I'm not going to that school.
You've been searching the kids' backpacks for years. Now you got to search the teachers. Where they going to store the guns? In the desk?
Well, what about the bulletproof backpack?
Ready to go?
Tell me why a backpack needs to be bulletproof. Okay.
When fear drives you, you don't make rational decisions. And that's the
Luther's hand is up.
It's a fear thing.
Right.
Gary, are you on here? Gary still here? Or is he gone? Okay.
Well, Luther's hand is up, and no, Gary's not here.
Go, lady.
Well, I was just thinking about, I think I don't know if you said it, Doc, when you were here, but somehow the conversation came up that we got to figure out how to make peace profitable, because the NRA is a tax exempt organization, which is the most ridiculous thing in the world, because there's no incentive for people to stop selling guns. If there aren't laws that are prohibiting it, if there's no incentive if it's incentivized to sell, to buy, to commodify guns, and it has to, coming from every angle, Lady Estelle, from schools, from classrooms, from feeding the prescription, the medicine, to absolutely everybody, but legislating, but looking at the profiteering, the racketeering, that there is a role for everyone. I think a lot about, Dr. Marshall in '99, when I met you, you put the idea that it was a public health issue front of my mind. And, 20 something years later, I work for public health because we're taking a public health approach to gun violence reduction. I guess what I just want to say about that is that approach makes sense to me when we operationalize it, because everybody's got a job to do. From the classroom, there's a job to do. From the law office, there's a job to do. From the street organization, there's a job to do. But I think I just keep meditating on what it means to make peace profitable, because that seems to be what makes us tick.
We were able to do this with cigarettes, because cigarettes was profitable. And I keep thinking, what's the key difference? We turned it into a health thing. Now forget the money, forget the money. It ain't about the money, it's my health. Trying to shift guns there is different. I'm not sure. I got to think about why more. And in fact, I did get into a conversation a little later. I'm not going to show you this part. We don't have time with him about how we did it with tobacco and the challenge to do that with firearms when they're both money-making industries, right? But somehow it got in people's minds, I ain't smoking and you can't smoke around me. You're right. So, I'm that way with guns. I ain't got one and you can't bring one around me. And I don't care if I am related to you. No, because it's a risk factor. It's the biggest risk factor. And I got to play with it in my head. Yeah, you got a right to smoke, but you ain't like fighting for that right. There's something here. And the only thing, it's so American. I mean, I guess tobacco was in Kentucky, but it was American too, but it's just so American. And it's more, you don't have a fear when you don't smoke, but you got a fear when you don't have the gun. And it is that fear-driven thing that, and man, I used to see episodes of The Twilight Zone about this, and people were, you turn on your neighbor, you turn on, people you've been friends with forever, and you could make them, are you the invader that came? No, man, I'm dude lived next to you all your life, right? And I used to watch this stuff, and people were just like, when that fear, America's operated on fear from day one, and the choice to deal with the fear has been arms. It's just, they've always dealt with the fear of the slave, the fear of the Native American, they just, and we're supposed to be civilized, but we the scariest folks around. We make everybody else scared. The fear of the immigrant. The immigrants are coming. The Mexicans are rapists. I mean, come on, man. Julio lived down the corner from you. He ain't, what are you talking about? But that fear, man, that has always been America's thing,
And it's the promotion of it. They're making commercials. Right. It's the promotion, and without that.
And that's what Trump did. It was all fear.
Right. They plant the fear.
Right. And then it's a profit. Yeah. It's a profit because without being able to promote the fear, and then it's on the commercials, and then they got us fearing somebody that looked just like me and you.
Exactly.
Somebody that looked just like me and you, and then it's associated. Not only is it fear, then it's associated with our manhood, because I could put myself back in. I put it back in motion when I used to carry a gun. It was just like when I didn't have one. I remember one time I woke up. It was a hot sunny day, and I was in just like a serious level of war. Mm-hmm. And I remember I used to put my vest on and put my clothes on and everything. And at the end of the day, my t-shirt be all wet underneath there. I got it on every day. And this one particular day, I had a nice little uniform on. And I said, nah, I ain't putting it on. I ain't putting all that on today. I said, they know who they're dealing with, blah, blah, blah. I didn't put it on. I felt, and then I said, I ain't carrying no gun today. They already know I got one. I felt so bad without having it. I never will forget that. I felt like it was just something I was doing wrong. I felt like I didn't have on underclothes or something. I just felt weird. And that's so much power. And I never forgot that. So I'm just imagine how young men is feeling today. And then if you have it and then you don't use it, what type of man is you? That's what they out there teaching to each other. What type of man is you if you ain't real prepared to use this and have this? It's just a whole lot going on. That's why it's a mandatory must that we need to start having some more effective programs for people coming back, because it's underestimated about just dealing with young people and dealing with people. I'm telling you, they coming back up out of our judicial system, turning young people out. Killers that's already in there for killing, coming back out, recruiting and turning other little young men into killers. By letting them know with fear, once again. So that promotion of fear is on all angles, all corners. Yep. So that's what
America.
Yeah. Stefan, I'm sorry. Go ahead, lady. You want to say something?
No. I was just saying, Stefan. Thank you, Khalid. And yeah, Stefan, your hand is up.
Stefan.
Khalid and Doc, you guys pretty much covered a lot of things I wanted to say, but I also want to say that we talk about the new breed of kids since COVID. And I was sitting there thinking about it. I'm going, well, where have I heard that before? Well, I heard it 20 years ago when Boys in the Hood came out about the new breed of kids. So I think it goes back to, they're not exactly a new breed of kids. It's just that going back to the time when you said that you grew up, Doc, and there were no guns, we've seen the breaking down of the moral of America, the breaking down of society. The TV have changed. Remember when TV, you didn't have a lot of violence in TV in the early 70s, and then 1980 came along, all of a sudden you had all these violent movies coming on TV, video games, the music. So the breaking down of the immune system has taken place, and that's what we're seeing. Also, since the mass shootings, I've heard more people say they're going to, particularly Black people, African Americans, say they're going to get a gun. Since a lot of the mass shootings, I've heard that.
Guns be got guns, man.
Exactly. And one more thing about San Diego, the first 2 months of the year, the police confiscated 372 guns. 77 of those were ghost guns. So we need to talk about that as well. As far as now, you don't have to go to the gun store to buy a gun. I mean, the kids are telling me they're ordering different parts from different countries, China, everywhere else, not from one store, because they know they can't just buy all pieces from one place. They're ordering different parts of it from different places and making them for themselves. So we got that issue going along.
We will see what the politicians do. And Luther's right, they're not my favorite people. And part of it is because I did give, Fred, I was there when Obama was in office, and this was the last time, I think it was after Newtown. And I was there with Biden and went in and listened to all these folks. And they somehow they have this thing of good guys with guns versus bad guys with guns. I said, how you gonna tell who's a good guy? Told me he's a good guy. What the hell are you talking about? I mean, they would come up with stuff to keep their guns no matter what, man. I mean, it was something. So, and I'm in a couple circles right now with the commission that I'm on Black men and boys. But I their motives ain't the same motives as ours. Ours are pure. Ours are we want to keep people alive and free. We ain't trying to get reelected. They got public servants in there. That's great. I mean, y'all got your whole. I don't even know what to say about y'all. Y'all, you don't deal with reality. You deal with the election wasn't stolen, but I'm gonna say it is anyway. Y'all got all kind of stuff you dealing with, and so we trying to keep people alive and free. It's that simple. That's it. We are stop the violence people. And I'm going to show you this last part, and then we'll come back, because this is what Timiko, you want to say something before I go to this? It's not very long, but I think he comes to the place where we are, and I want to leave us with that. Timiko, go right ahead.
I think one thing that I'm seeing too in this new strain of kids is the last 2 years have left them really disconnected from each other. Right. And I think the more disconnected you are from the people around you, and I think it's happening to the adults too.
Right.
I think that makes all of this that much more dangerous, because you're not seeing people as people anymore, right? And you're not seeing the humanity in them. And I think we're running up against that a little bit after the last 2 years as well.
And social media don't help it. We know that too. Yeah. And let's show this last piece, and we'll come back and wrap it up.
Look at it this way: guns are consumer products. So is ammunition. The people who stoke the fears are the people who stand to benefit. So look at advertising for guns. It's all about protection. Look at advertising for ammunition, for that matter. And the other thing you can do is one can do, not you, is stoke hatred, stoke reasons for wanting to have a gun, because sitting right alongside gun purchasing now is stoking fear is a way to get votes. And as that man we will not name, and millions of other people like him are trying to change the direction of the country.
Right.
And they can do that by stoking fear and stoking hate and arming people up.
And that's, for me, why I say it's so American. And I was talking to somebody the other day. I said, I see why you said it from my point of view, because that happened right after Reconstruction. That happened, that happened then. I can go back, don't free the slaves because, right? So then I got to be honest. So for me, this is as American as it can be. because the gun in many ways has always been pointed at us, right?
Yes.
So it's just, 60 years after you mentioned 60 years ago, 60 years after seeing Dr. King and living through the civil rights movement, and Medgar Evers and Malcolm X and all of that, and seeing people march in the South without guns, without fear, literally walking down there, going from places, all walks of life, risking their life, getting on buses and not having the protection of anyone, and ultimately getting Kennedy and Johnson to send in troops, right? But unafraid, dealing with the fears to make massive changes in this, in this society. This other kind of fear ain't gonna work. It's just not gonna work. You're gonna continue to have this. So I guess folks like me and you, we just gotta continue to save as many people as in a, I always say, and I do this so medical, like I think you get it. Disease begins to attack the body from the child is born, right? I mean, but we have developed a profession, a cadre of people who are going to do everything they can to keep you disease free and to treat you if you get ill. And if it was up to them, you live to be 150, right? So, but you have a dedicated profession that, and I tell the young people, doctors, in a world full of sickness and disease, there are people dedicated to keeping you medically, alive. And my approach, and I say this to the kids and the people I talk to all the time, I do these workshops with, is in a world full of violence, my job is to decrease the risk that you will be a victim or even a perpetrator of violence. Well, how can you do that? Well, then that's when the, the lessons begin. So just like, as an MD, me and I happen to be a PhD in psychologist, but I call myself a doctor of the disease of violence.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to, just get people to dare to be different, because I know that I personally, it decreases their risk, even though they think that it increases their risk. And that's the yin and yang of this whole thing. And I teach people to deal with their fears and the whole bit. But you could sort of confirm my suspicions that we're in this cycle, right? We're in this cycle, and I don't want, unfortunately, bloodletting is not a fun thing. Grief brings grief, which brings more fear, which brings more anger, which brings more this. It just doesn't work. Yeah. Violence. Gandhi said it best: an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind.
Yeah.
And we got our work cut out for us, don't we, sir?
We do. People these days and at times past say, how do you stay in it? Why don't you despair? Don't you give up? And I tell them, there are two things. One, there's optimism. Optimism is based on evidence, kind of weighing, yep, looks like we're good. And then there's hope. Hope is not based on evidence necessarily. Hope is just that thing that rises up within us at bad, dark moments and says, no, you're just not allowed to give up. I will never stop believing in the capacity of humankind to change for the better. And as long as that capacity is there, even in theory, I know which side of the ledger I want my life to be on. And I am hopefully living it that way, but also very consciously, as I think you are, showing others how such a life can be lived, showing others how each one of us can bring our knowledge and our skills and our innate gifts to working to better the human condition. Because the alternative is that we give up. And if the good guys give up, the bad guys win.
Oh, absolutely.
It's that simple.
Absolutely.
Okay. we ended up in a good place, I think, you see. And that's our philosophy here. And I like that saying that I've been using for a while. May not be able to save you from the world, but I can save the world from you. So every person that we deal with can be one of those people that's part of the problem, or they can be part of the solution. And everybody's got anger, fear, and pain. And the thing is, what do you deal with it? And how you deal with it? And that's why I love all of y'all, because we're just trying to save folks. We're trying to there's nothing more valuable than the individual's life. And just thank all of you for being like that. And
Llewellyn's hand was up. I don't want you to forget Llewellyn. His hand was up for a minute.
I'm hearkening back to, and
I
do draw strength from the Freedom Riders and that group of folks who were fearless in their work. I really do, and that's why watching that video and looking at that, and I wonder, where are those folks? Where are those folks? They dealt with their fear. They went in there. They knew they was getting blasted. They didn't care. I gotta save somebody. I draw strength from that, and I'm gonna start to use that more and more, because that group took a whole issue head on and did something about it. Llewellyn, and then each of you can wrap up. And thank you for everything tonight. Go ahead, Llewellyn.
Thank you, Doc. I'm very concerned about this new generation of young people. And I'm calling our babies 14, 15 years old. They're becoming increasingly more violent. Yeah. There's no negotiation. They rob, but they also rob us to maim and kill. About a month ago, we lost 3 people connected to our school in a violent fire, which was gang related. And I found myself 2 weeks ago at a funeral where I had to stop gangs from, coming into the funeral and causing a havoc. What shocked me was it was 13, 14-year-olds walking with guns, knives, machetes, and they are law unto their own in some of our communities. And for me, that is one of the biggest concerns of what's happening to our young people. And these young babies, they can't even think properly, even trying to, going alive and free to comprehend what you're trying to say. Young people, has been out of school for 3, 4, 5 years. And that for me is a sad part of this new trend of young people that's ruling and our communities and threatening our communities and people. And basically, as adults, we are scared. We don't see the OGs anymore. They're not there. They're not listening to the OGs anymore. And they're just running havoc in some of our communities. And that for me is a big, big worry and concern.
Well, I'm coming. I'm going to come. Let's get it cracking. All right, anybody, last thoughts on this?
Is this the wrap up?
Mm-hmm. What'd you say to me? What'd you say?
This the wrap up, Doc.
This is the wrap up. This is the wrap up. Say
all
what
right.
you want to say. Let's all get to your.
I'll be really quick.
Tomorrow.
I'll be real quick. Because I have some reflections, and I don't particularly know how deep we want to go tonight. But what I will say is that we have armed forces to protect this democracy we all covet, right? We cherish the democracy and the freedom we have, and we have armed forces to protect that. How do we think about that? How do we reconcile that? You have American patriots storming the US Capitol to protect democracy, Americans, right? What do you say about that? Armed and ready to wield violence to protect what they feel are their rights, right? The other thing that I'm very concerned about is always language. Do you know that a negative seed stays in a mind just as long as a positive seed? And when you think about the language we pour into young people, negative language stays longer. And so when you think about a virus, as we have continued to name this new strain of young people, of any virus has an origin. And so we have to go back and figure out what happened at the beginning, because it didn't start with the young folks. The other thing I want to be very careful about as a formerly incarcerated convicted person, and I'm pretty sure a lot of folks on here have had that experience, is that not everybody returning home from incarceration is prepared or ready to wield or do violence in our communities. Mm-hmm. And we have been fighting so hard to push back against those narratives. And yes, there are some folks who have not transformed their mind, their thinking, and their behavior, but they do not represent us all. And so as we think about how we continue to interrupt violence in our communities, consider ourselves violence interrupters, addressing gun violence as a public health issue, let's also consider the language we use, the violence that is inherent in language, and how we move forward to do our work as a community.
Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else want to wrap up?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, one thing about the situation I'm working with these young people is I was one of them, and I was the nucleus of the problem. And I was able to be blessed with somebody taking time out for me continuously and not giving up on me. And I was able to turn being lost and being serious about it. Going digging a grave, digging down in the dirt to put myself into the ground. The only thing that I do when I speak 100% facts, and I haven't left my community. You know, a lot of people be popping off at the lip, but they don't be down inside them communities dealing with these brothers. I haven't left my community. I left it from doing negative, but as I see from my from the percentages of brothers representing my inner city where I come from, it's increasingly that a lot of brothers is coming home from doing a lot of time. I got family members that did it, and it's a lot of them coming out more. It's some coming out handling business, but it's a lot of them coming out killing. And that's what's going on now. You know, like I see names and faces popping up in my head, and I can go over with 10 that have done it already right now inside of our cities. So I'm just saying that that's something that we got to deal with. And I'm blessed to be able to be working from the inside out instead of from the outside in, guessing, trying to figure out how are we going to do it. I'm just blessed to know where I could start from, because I was in it and I never got out of it. I mentally got out of it, but I kept my mind and my aim on, I'm gonna help this pool of madness that I come from. So I just be discussing my pool, where I come from. And my pool is, I'm from Richmond, California. And we didn't expand it out in the Bay Area. And then my friends was from Oakland, and it's a lot of brothers that, you know, we are in trouble out there. So we got our jobs filled up for us, but it can happen because I know somebody like me was able to get flipped. So I know we can do it. And that's why, like they said, I'm not allowed to give up. I'm just not allowed to give up.
Somebody else, you want to, any last, we kept you overtime, but I can't think of nothing better than overtime than life and freedom. So if there's no one else, Lady E, you know, you always give us a perspective as we check off, and Stefan getting ready and I getting ready to jump into a training tomorrow in Oakland. So, you know, we got a whole new bunch of folks to bring this prescription to. It's going to always fun to have these conversations with them about life, staying alive and free. Lady E.
I think that with prayer, consistency, determination, and then remember, I have to agree with Tamisha. There's power in what we say and how we say what we say. And that, what comes from the heart reaches the heart. And when we're working with the young people, even those that are in and just got out and are thinking about, if we can say the best thing that we can say, that could help awaken empower and redirect our young people so that they make choices to live. We can begin there.
Thank you, members of the Alive and Free Consortium. The fact that you are into the Alive and Free Peace Consortium means that we got a team of folks out there trying to do what other folks consider to be impossible.
He's frozen.
He's frozen.
All right. All right. So, is he coming back yet? All right. Thank you so much for being here.
Look, the world needs you. Certainly America
Does the world need you?
I'm frozen again. I'm frozen again. Well,
You were frozen.
Let's freeze for real. So good night, all of you. I'll talk to you soon. We'll let you know how it goes in Oakland. And we love you. Alive and free.
Love you,
Alive
family.
and free. Alive and free.
Live and free.
See y'all soon.
Good night.
Okay.
Good night.
Night.
Thank you guys.
Then I'm gonna call you.